And joining us now from Houston, the BP Managing Director overseeing response efforts in the Gulf, Robert Dudley. Good morning, Mr. Dudley. Thanks for joining us.
Good morning, George.
Let's begin with the good news from yesterday. It looks like you got that tube inserted. Do you have any better sense this morning of how much oil and gas it is siphoning up and how much is actually coming out of the big pipe?
So, George, we've got flow going. It's great progress over the last 24 hours. What we're doing is slowly doing something called opening up the choke at the top of the well to slowly increase the flow rates. We want to draw down the pressures at the bottom without bringing in the seawater, because that creates something like hydrates. So we're doing this slowly, and over the next day or so, we should have a better idea of the flow rate from the well.
And your hope is that in the next 10 to 12 days, your next effort to actually cap the well will be in place?
George, that's right. The flow is from the end of a riser, which is laying down some distance from the wellhead. In addition to that, in parallel, we've got an engineering operation where we will enter the blowout preventers at the wellhead and be able to inject some heavy fluids to try to permanently stop the flow from the well.
Meanwhile,
in addition to that, we're still drilling the relief wells as well as backup.
But that, of course, could take months. Meanwhile, there's so much concern about these deep underwater plumes. Scientists have detected some plumes, as we said, up to 10 miles long. And the congressman in charge of overseeing the oil industry, Congressman Ed Markey, had a very tough statement for BP yesterday. He said that BP is burying its head in the sand on these underwater threats. These huge plumes of oil are like hidden mushroom clouds that indicate a larger spill than originally thought and portend more dangerous long-term fallout for the Gulf of Mexico's wildlife and economy. How severe is this threat, and how do you respond to the charge that you're burying your head in the sand?
Well, George, we're working as part of a unified command center with the Coast Guard and NOAA, government agencies. We're measuring things at the seabed. We see satellite pictures at the surface. I think that that's the best science available. These other studies, which are being done independently and pointing this out, we're going to investigate them, of course. The Joint Incident Command is going to investigate them. But as to date, it's hard to even comment on them.
So you don't share that concern? Excuse me, sir. You don't share that concern that the chemical dispersants may actually be making this worse?
Well, chemical dispersants are really essentially like soap suds. It's like soap that breaks up the oil into very small droplets, and then it biodegrades, and that's part of the natural processes of it. So what will happen then is a little bit of the oxygen will be reduced. That means the bacteria is working. We think we see the natural processes at work here through the use of the dispersant. Finally,
sir, as you know, there's some concern on whether BP is going to live up to its responsibilities on the liability, paying for the damages of this spill. And over the weekend, Secretaries Napolitano and Salazar sent a letter to BP CEO Tony Hayward that said in part, "We understand that BP will not in any way seek to rely on the potential $75 million statutory cap to refuse to provide compensation to any individuals or others harmed by the oil spill, even if more than $75 million is required, and BP will not seek reimbursement from the American taxpayers." Are BP and the administration on the same page?
George, we've said from day one we'll take responsibility for the spill. We will not hide behind the $75 million cap. We're taking responsibility for the spill, not just in words. We've set up claim centers across the Gulf Coast. We're issuing checks to those who have been affected in the fishing areas so they don't miss a boat payment or a house payment. They put food on the table. I think we're seeing not only our agreement with that, as well as our actions.
So just to be clear, the $75 million cap is irrelevant and BP will pay all legitimate claims?
All legitimate claims, that's right. As one of the responsible parties, we will pay all legitimate claims. We've said that from day one.
Okay, Mr. Dudley, thanks very much for your time this morning.